Welcome back. We've got a great opportunity to talk with someone that has founded a local nonprofit here in Asheville called SeekHealing. I'm really excited to have Jenesis with us. So what I would like to do is just you're a founder, and I don't get to talk to founders too often. So I want to kind of dive into that a little bit. Tell us a little bit about the inspiration for starting SeekHealing, and maybe include a personal story of what motivated you to start the organization.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think at this point in my life, it really feels like a privilege to be doing such purpose-driven work. I know that for the early part of my career, so much of my work felt kind of lined up for me, or I was just kind of looking at the options and choosing the one that seemed most interesting or least bad of all the options that I had coming out of high school and then out of college.
Purpose-driven.
So being involved in this work really is purpose-driven and is the result of me encountering a very real problem in my life and getting together with people that I care about and people who I admire and coming up with a new solution. So, and I think that's true for a lot of those of us who work in nonprofits, whether you start a nonprofit yourself or you're starting a program within an existing nonprofit. So SeekHealing specifically is a mental health organization. The best way to understand it is that it's actually a social health and wellness organization, which is a new type of model within the mental health ecosystem. And what that means is it exists specifically to address the loneliness epidemic that we're seeing in this country that was announced by the Surgeon General a few years ago. And we are, in fact, experiencing a loneliness epidemic here in the U.S., which means that a sizable portion of our population is experiencing social isolation and loneliness. And what the research shows is that it has very detrimental effects on health, both physical wellness and mental health. And my personal story came from mental health and my experience of how all the different flavors of social isolation and loneliness can impact mental health and substance use and addiction in particular, is where my story comes from. In my 20s, I lost way too many of my friends to death by overdose. And amidst my own anger and grief around those losses, as well as really coming to terms with my own addictions and my own tendencies, I saw very clearly firsthand how all of the different ways that we can experience isolation and disconnection in our world directly resulted in the deaths of my friends. And the reason why I say all the different types of loneliness is because I think it's not so straightforward. There's the kind of loneliness that's really obvious, where you don't come out of your room, you isolate in your house, you don't see people for, way too long. That's kind of more prototypical depression, and that's really true for a lot of folks. For me, my experience of being disconnected was much more socially acceptable. I was moving around in the world. I had a lot of friends, or at least a lot of connections, and those connections felt empty. They were really superficial, and that at a neurochemical and neurobiological level shows up exactly the same as the person who's isolated in their house and has the same kind of impact on someone's mental health. So that was my experience. I had friends, many friends who were struggling with different types of addictions, and opioid addiction in particular. So it's a bit of a longer story, but my frustration with the resources that were and were not available to me and my friends are what led us to start SeekHealing.
I want to dig into that loneliness epidemic, because I would think that's kind of new for some people, at least as a term, but probably something people are feeling. So, and it's probably something that we want to easily point at certain things in our culture as the culprit or the scapegoat for that. But it's probably more complicated than that, because the thing that comes to my mind is, oh, it's the internet. It's got to be the internet, you know? But I'm sure it's more involved than that. But that is the basis of your guys' mission then, is to combat this, loneliness epidemic. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
And in doing so, really address the root causes of these secondary public health epidemics, like chronic illness, like drug overdoses, like suicides, understanding that the root causes of so many of these issues is social isolation. And you're right, it is complex and nuanced, and it's not just a simple thing that you can point to and scapegoat and say, this is why. I don't think it's just the internet. And a lot of people, the trainings that we offer and the different experiences we offer do involve putting your phone down. They involve, kind of, although we use technology to mediate some of our online connections, ultimately what all of our programs are doing are inviting you to bring your full attention and presence to whatever social interaction you're having. And it's fascinating. I'm like a bit of a neuroscience nerd. It's really fascinating to see what's going on in the brain when we bring our full attention to someone or something. It's ultimately quite healing for our brains and our bodies. And it's hard to come by in this world because of the internet in large part. So I want to, make space for that. It's true that the internet and social media in particular have had a huge influence on what our social norms are as a culture. And I think it's at this stage we are where we are, and this is the technology that we have. And I think it's less helpful to say, oh, we need to throw all this technology away and go back to some sort of hunter-gatherer sort of lifestyle. The truth is, it was a lot harder to live back then. Like, we didn't have safe or easy access to food. Half of our tribe members were getting mauled by tigers every other day. And there's like a lot that technology has done for us over these past 10,000 years. And I think there is a really interesting trade-off that we're seeing at this stage in human evolution and where we are in 2025, that so much focus on developing those tools and technology has led some of our social and cultural systems to degrade. So I think about it less as like throwing away the internet or throwing away technology, and more about how can we use this incredible technology we have effectively and be really intentional, probably more intentional than any of our ancestors have ever been, about connecting with each other on purpose at certain times for certain reasons.
Yeah, these things aren't going away, so how do we use them? How do we work with them? But I love that, so much of the modern medical system has, addressed the symptom, take this to address the symptom. But within public health, there's this idea of going upstream, right? If everyone downstream is getting sick, you can't just treat everybody for their illnesses. You got to go upstream and figure out what's causing this. And so I'm hearing that, this going upstream is what you guys have done, and what you found is the epidemic of loneliness is causing kind of all these little downstream issues.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. And we're just one of a number of players and voices in this field, right? Absolutely. I mean, Vivek Murthy, the former U.S. Surgeon General, is one of I'm just so grateful for the work that he's done in the past 10 years to really elevate this as a major public health issue. And a lot of scientists and academics have been contributing to a growing body of research that shows the correlations between things like loneliness and cardiovascular disease, loneliness and opioid addiction, and other things. What I think we're poised to see now is more implementation models, I'll call them, or applications. There's been a lot of conversation about this is a problem in the last 10 years, and SeekHealing is one of the first few organizations popping up as okay, we know very clearly what the problem is. What's the application? How do we actually address loneliness on the ground?
Okay, so that gives us a kind of a background for SeekHealing. When did it get started exactly?
Yeah, we got our official 501c3 status as a nonprofit in 2017. Okay. And the first programming started in 2018, so it kind of took a while to get everything sorted out and get programs set up. And then the first program that we delivered was a listening training course in March 2018.
Yeah, that piggybacks well. So tell us about your services. What are some of the things that SeekHealing does?
Yeah, so our programs and services roughly fall into 3 categories. We provide, and everything is provided at no cost to participants as a nonprofit. So we provide education and training around how to have healthy relationships, how to have social interactions that just feel more meaningful and more connecting, how to listen more closely both to myself and what my own needs are in a relationship or a friendship, and how to listen more attentively to other people. Like, how do I stop just planning what I'm going to say next and actually listen to you as you're sharing? Boundary setting, all those kinds of skills that are important in healthy social interactions. So we provide training is one category of programming, and then we provide facilitated experiences of human connection and community, specifically inviting folks who might not otherwise have access, people who are living outside of community. So those 2 buckets of facilitated experiences are experiences that are facilitated for groups of people, and then experiences that are facilitated for people one-on-one, because depending on someone's trauma background, what they've survived, because so much of our programming and services are targeted to people who are most disproportionately impacted by the loneliness epidemic, we're often serving folks who may not have had a meaningful social interaction ever in their life, or this is the first time they've been listened to in 10, 15 years. And so with that sort of sensitivity around socializing, it just really varies by person, whether they're more open for whatever reason to connecting one-on-one versus connecting in groups. So for that reason, we do one-on-one programming, we do group programming, and then we have our educational and training piece as well.
Wow, I mean, that impacts me, like, to just hear that there might be someone coming to you that hasn't been listened to in 10 or 15 years. That just, all this stuff seems so, like we take this stuff for granted, that we're being listened to, but are we really being listened to in our daily lives? So that's really wild. That's interesting. And then the other thing, as you were sharing that, I was thinking this could be good for so many different age groups. Is there a particular age group that you focus on, or tell me a little bit about that?
Sure, it's relevant across age groups. We've worked with folks as young as 11 years old, and as old as 95 or 96, I think is one of the oldest participants in our circles. So yeah, it's very relevant across ages, and we have been doing more and more recently intentional work around intergenerational connection, because there's so much rich friendship and connection and mentorship that can happen across generations. So the programming is like a little bit different for people under the age of 18, but really not functionally that different.
Okay. So I was looking at your website, and I saw a term that I wanted you to kind of explain to me a little more, that "we are the medicine" came up a number of times. So talk to me a little bit about that concept that you guys have.
Yeah, it's the tagline for our logo, "We are the medicine," and it kind of gets back to what you were talking about a moment ago about medical models and this particular philosophy or strategy that I see pretty pervasive in Western medical models to identify a cure and often a solution, often in the form of a medicine or a chemical or a drug that solves that problem, that is the cure for that diagnosis. For better or worse, our medical models are kind of designed to identify those silver bullets and those cures. And when it comes to something as complex as loneliness and disconnection in modern society, as we've been talking about, there is no silver bullet. The only thing that works is connection and meaningful human connection, organic human connection that can't be bottled into a pill, can't be sold at the drugstore. So when we say we are the medicine, we mean literally you and I taking the time to listen to each other, taking the time to give each other our full attention. That is actually medicine. And we understand now that it can be, you can actually measure what's happening in the brain when we're having that kind of slow, empathy-focused conversation. It is actually healing, especially for traumatic patterns in the brain.
Wow.
And so, we are the medicine also just kind of, I like how it invites all of us, you know, we can all participate in each other's healing and each other's wellness.
Now, is it a hierarchical kind of system or service, if you will, or like is there a counselor and then a patient kind of relationship, or is it, tell me about that.
It's an excellent question. The actually at the heart of the model is this idea of non-hierarchy. And the reason why we focus on that, or why we put so much effort into making sure that we're diffusing power dynamics wherever we can, is because of what we understand about the neuroscience of connection and what's going on in our brains when we're connecting. There are many different ways that humans can connect with each other, but this kind that I keep pointing towards in this conversation that I'm calling like a healthy social interaction, a meaningful connection, those are connections that are marked by, there's a model for this called the relational model for social health, and they're connections that are marked by things like empathy, mindfulness, mutuality, and we just understand that that particular type of connection that is so healthy for our healing process is one that is free of power dynamics. Because when two people are in a power dynamic, it impacts their communication, it impacts the way that their nervous system is responding to the other people. They might be a little bit more protected or guarded, which just changes how much empathy they can exchange, how much their nervous systems can co-regulate with each other. So as much as possible in SeekHealing programming, we strive to create non-hierarchy between the people who are listening to each other. So for that reason, it's not led by counselors. All of the services are non-clinical in and of themselves. We do work alongside clinical providers, but the best way to think of these social health opportunities are kind of like a first line intervention or a response to trauma, to grief, like as it's happening in community. This is a thing that we need between when something happens and when we can book an appointment with our therapist. This is the idea that we can democratize meaningful emotional support for each other outside of a doctor's office, outside of a therapist office, because ultimately, like, we really need that support from each other in community. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
No, absolutely. The democratization, if that's a word, of this is, the need is so big. So without kind of utilizing the community to do some of this, and your guys' model, there may not be enough practitioners out there to serve this kind of level of epidemic that you guys are facing and taking on. Yeah, exactly. And we're already seeing burnout at such high rates in the clinical world as these mental health epidemics are getting worse and worse. It's, I think, more critical than ever that we activate community. And the truth is, and this is what we teach through our trainings so fervently, and what I believe so passionately, is that we are all qualified to listen to each other. I'm not qualified to give you professional advice as a therapist, to say, well, you should look at this, or have you thought about, what happened with your mother at whatever age. But listening, and what we teach at SeekHealing, which is just empathic listening, reflecting, asking curious questions, telling you how it landed with me, that's something that we can all do for each other, and that has real meaningful impact for someone who's otherwise unsupported. So you guys started here in Asheville, and have you expanded out beyond the city of Asheville? Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah. So our very first programs were held in downtown Asheville, even before we had a facility of our own. We were meeting in coffee shops and libraries and Firestorm Books in West Asheville was kind of our home base for a long time. And In 2019, we moved into a space inside the United Way building on French Broad Ave. So that's been our home base in Asheville for a while now. Okay. And thanks to support from some of our early partners and folks working in public health who are supporting innovative ideas like Dogwood Health Trust and Via Health. Excuse me. Thanks to help from some of our early supporters like Dogwood Health Trust and Via Health, we were able to branch out and provide these services more broadly and reach folks who are living more deeply in rural isolation outside of Buncombe County. So we opened our center in Haywood County in Waynesville in 2021. And since then, we've been working in a mobile outreach sort of way to bring some of these programs and services further out into the further western 9 counties. And I think the beautiful thing about this model is if there's someone who's a natural leader, someone who is a peer support specialist, someone who has a desire to impact their community, anyone who is feeling the pain of disconnection in their community, it's a very simple way to empower that person to make an impact wherever they live. So you don't even need the kind of facility that we have here in Asheville to deliver the programs, and we're figuring out better each day how we can do that in more rurally isolated areas.
That's awesome. So you guys are on the move. You're expanding, growing your footprint, doing such an amazing needed role in the community. This has been a really great conversation. I know there's probably a lot more to know about SeekHealing, and I'll definitely put some direction towards your website. But thank you so much for coming in and talking with us today, and hope you guys all enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us, Jody, and look forward to meeting all of you. We are always looking to grow our team with people who are like-minded and who share these values and believe in building a more connected world.